What Drives You is brought to you by Ziglar, your premier source for equipping life and leadership coaches. Visit Ziglar.com and let them inspire your true coaching performance.
Yeah.
Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller, and I'm here to help you get more clarity on what drives you and why, so you can upshift your life to go further and faster with more peace and ease. We are driven people who want to reach great destinations and achievements, but also enjoy the daily drive so much we don't ever want to stop driving because every day feels like a success. In this episode, how to stop anxiety from draining your energy. Actually sounds like a big claim. We all just kind of accepted anxiety as this norm, and yet it is a culprit that is draining our energy every day, every moment. Here's the deal. I mean, you do have anxiety. I do too, as well. We're all on the spectrum. Our effort here is to help you understand that this anxiety issue is at work, and you can mitigate it. In our culture today, we know, for an analogy, pesticides, right? They've gotten into all our foods. We cannot escape it. It permeates our entire country at this point, if not our world. It's the same with anxiety. I mean, we live amongst it and we can't avoid it. Even if we don't really feel like, I'm not really worrying about much, you're still within a culture that is. And we've normalized anxiety. And we're finding people are so often feeling drained by the end of the day, and they aren't aware of the role that anxiety, either in us or around us or both, it plays such a big part in our life. So I'm with today in this episode, my Peak Wellness co-host, as always, Randy James, medical doctor and functional medicine expert. We're going to get anxiety on the table and discuss how to mitigate it. The topic of anxiety. So when you say that, I hear Dr. Randy James saying, we are all on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Always have been.
Yeah.
Our grandparents were, we're all on the spectrum of anxiety. Is it fair? I mean, is worry though paramount? I mean, is that the definition of anxiety we're talking about? Because you can have anxiety and excitement about.
Right. It's my turn to bat. I'm anxious about.
But it's still worry though, isn't it? It's worry, am I going to perform?
Am I going to perform? That's right. Well, let me flip it around, Kevin, and ask you, just give me your gut response. What's the opposite of anxiety?
Gut is peace.
Yeah. Most people would say peace, joy, those kind of words.
Even it might be confidence even.
Okay. Confidence. And then, so the question is, are we all on the spectrum of peace and joy and confidence?
Yeah.
And so here
even daily, depending on what I'm doing in my life. If I'm sitting here writing something, I might feel uber confident. If I'm getting ready to do a interview with somebody, I might waver a little bit of my confidence. And then if a kid asks me a hard question,
say, hey, Kevin, we're going to play soccer. How about you join in?
I don't even know I don't know the rules. Yeah.
Now imagine here we are in this world, and people are going forth into their marriages, into their fatherhood, into their work. And do you think most people are driving to work with a sense of peace and joy and confidence, resilience?
No, and I think we're unaware. And to the point at hand here, anxiety, I'm figuring that it has become, like many things, ill health-wise, it has become the norm. And now we're all sitting at a greater level of anxiety, and we're totally clueless because it's just, it's become normalized.
Yeah, that's why, as we were talking before, I wanted to bring this topic up, even though we've sort of talked about it from a different viewpoint in the past, but it is now the number one mental health disorder. It is the number one diagnosis, is anxiety. And almost always, like whenever I diagnose anxiety with an ICD-10 code of F something, because F means psychological, it's always anxiety with depression or depression with anxiety. They're flip sides of the same coin, because if somebody has lack of joy, lack of peace, lack of confidence, I would be depressed too. Why am I driving to this job? Why won't my son do XYZ like I asked him to do? Am I failing as a father? What? And so then of course there would be depression on the other side of that. And the stimulus, the impetus, and the book that we'll mention is this book, Finding Quiet, by J.P. Moreland. And the reason it struck me is when he wrote it later in 2019, pre-COVID, and his muse was when he was 55. So just like me and you, right? At essentially, he's reached his career, not peak, but he's a full professor. He's got it, right? He's teaching what he wants to. He's got a PhD in theology and one in philosophy. He's there. And he wakes up in the middle of the night with a full-on panic attack for no, quote unquote, no apparent reason. Right? Like you and I have...
Like he caught it, like a virus.
He just caught the virus.
Which is everything. We all think we caught it. Yeah.
That's right. Like, son of a gun, I woke up today and I caught COVID. Or I caught cancer.
Didn't have my mask on.
I didn't have my anxiety mask on. Or my genetics has led to this. And here's the thing, with anxiety, what do most people blame?
Work? I don't know.
Circumstances.
Oh, well, sure.
In the studies, though, when you dig into this and you peel back the layers, because, okay, what about, again, this guy, his work is exactly what he's dreamed about for his entire life.
Every reason to be happy, at peace, and confident.
Do most people out of work in Ethiopia have anxiety and what?
Well, I was just going to say, because when you talk about circumstances, no matter what my underlying pathology and brokenness and illness and worry and whatever is, if I'm stranded by myself on a desert island for a month, as long as there's food there and not, animals that are going to eat me, what anxiety do I have? So
your own brain. Right? You still bring yourself with you. Yeah,
but I could theoretically be there and kind of be at peace. It's back here when I get into the circumstances of life and parenting and spouse and work that just exacerbate what's already there, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah. Okay. So in the studies, and this is, of course, this is the soft science, right? How do you study psychology and things like that? So it's not like studying chemistry and physics. So granted, the results are kind of squishy and we have to think about them and interpret them. But then, so the experts are now saying, well, probably 10% of anxiety, 10% of the cause of anxiety is environment, circumstances. But if you ask the average Joe on the street, they'll say
100%.
It's It's, you got to be kidding me. If I had $1 million and I was on the beach and my wife would just do this, I'd be perfectly happy. No, you wouldn't. And we know that. So how do we go to Randy and Kevin and say, when we kind of are on our spectrum of anxiety, or we perceive lack of peace, joy, resilience, confidence, and then we think, if I could just get that thing done, that book written, that new client, that whatever else, then I would be becoming okay. No, you wouldn't.
Well, so you and I were just talking about, so I talked with Tommy Breedlove. He is a coach to high-performing men, let's call that. And he said one of the primary issues that they deal with is, I'm going to say imposter syndrome, is ultimately lack of confidence, low, self-esteem issues. He says, he's walking with these guys every day. It doesn't matter if it's a CEO worth $100 million or a starving artist worth nothing. He says, it doesn't matter. If it's a guy, this is what they are primarily dealing with across the board, which takes away the circumstances.
That's right.
Because the artist might think, man, if I only had 100 million, and this guy's thinking, if I didn't have all these responsibilities.
That's right. And you and I have testified to that as well, that if I'm in a room by myself for 15 minutes, then the bubble up, feeling of concern is going to be, am I enough to be what my wife needs for her happiness?
And I don't want to leave this, but I keep getting, it's what's gnawing on me too, though, is for the person out there who may feel like things are pretty good. I don't want them to miss their anxiety on the spectrum for maybe some other, they may feel like things are pretty good. They feel fairly confident, circumstances are good, because I feel like people are still, even that person is still at a higher rate of anxiety. And I'm wondering about some of the causations, even like we talk about and we're talking about this with kids, but I feel like it affects a lot of people with information age, with social media, with so much available. I've been a little bit enamored with what everybody refers to it as FOMO, fear of missing out. And I'm thinking of it because somebody in my family, and I can't recall who it was, kind of jokingly refer to that of like, oh my gosh, but if we don't watch whatever, we're going to miss out. We're going to miss out. And even said, how do I keep? No, it was my wife talking about these shows. She says, oh my gosh, Kevin, I'm not keeping up with the podcast. Dude, I put out 4 per week, and there's a lot of other great information out there. I hope mine's great. There's a lot of others. I said, let it go. It's okay. But just that. So here she's having anxiety about keeping up with the pace.
Yeah.
So I wanted to hit on that because we have the pace of, that's the pace of, she's wanting to get good information into her head. What's wrong with that? And it's causing her anxiety. And we've got the next Netflix thing, and the thing your buddy says you should, binge watch XYZ or whatever. But even that, how many people are looking at the next book, the New York Times list that came out? There's a next book that might change their life. Right. The next podcast, the next magazine article, the next thing. You're always coming, Kevin, you have to listen to this. You're giving me anxiety, man, because I am missing out. And there's so much that on any given day, I could feel like I am missing out on education, entertainment, opportunity loss. I think about that a lot with business.
Okay. So imagine that there's a coach who's looking at Randy and Kevin and going to the full spectrum of people who really do have a tough marriage and it causes anxiety, a tough job and a tough financial situation. And to tell those people, no, that doesn't matter in your happiness. That feels overly blunt.
Sure.
Okay, so we're giving grace to everybody. Like you and I would feel even anxiety of feeling shame for not being as happy as I could be because of all the blessings that I do have.
There's no end to how many things I can feel shame about. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so there's the coach. He's looking at us. The muse that I think is great, and there's so many of them, but let's use golf. If you wanted to become a good golfer, would you read an article or two and expect to become a good golfer?
Not just from that.
Would you go sit around with a bunch of guys and talk about golf and really chew it up?
Yeah.
Okay, as in the Christian sense, what do most people do when they're like, hey, let's get into this? They go and read a few pages in the Bible, a commentary. They go and chew it up with their pastor, their friends, and they expect to be different. But they don't do the do.
Well, right? It makes me think of fruits of the Spirit because I'll never forget my wife saying at some point we were talking about, I wish I was more patient. And she said something to that effect of, well, God's probably going to give you the opportunity to have to be patient. That's how you're going to grow it.
And it would create anxiety in you.
Yeah, it would. It would. If I want to be more compassionate, put myself in the opportunity to have...
To grow the muscle.
To grow the muscle as opposed to just hoping it'll get implanted by
to read about
a scripture, which is going to ruffle some feathers, but that's knowledge is a starting point.
And my feathers are ruffled already. It's like, okay, how do we do the do of peace, resilience, confidence, joy? And how do we do the don't be anxious, don't be worried, because if all you do is say, don't worry about it, just get over it, just be okay.
Yeah.
This is what I think people in that anxious world that they hear the other people saying, especially their spouse, just get over it. And that is like me handing you a golf club and say, just golf. It's ridiculous. Or just go run a 5-minute mile. Or just do anything. Just go speak German. If you want to be becoming the kind of person that is well-being, resilience, joy, and peace and those kind of things and less anxiety, and the word that you and I said this morning is, if I'm telling myself, I want to flourish as a follower of Jesus, as a father, as a husband, if I could eavesdrop on what my wife would say about me to somebody else, if there's a flourishingness there, how do I exercise that muscle? And so I'm looking at you and me here, and other people are going to have to hear it into their own world, is how do we proactively exercise the muscles of the doing of this thing called golf that we're saying is resilience and peace? Okay. Well, number one is that's what coaching is. Step outside of yourself and you see yourself with your golf swing. Okay, now the coach is going to say, oh, gosh, you're dropping your shoulder. Again, I told you, don't do that. Okay, tomorrow we're going to just swing 100 swings and you keep your shoulder up. We don't care how the ball goes. Just keep your shoulder up. Just turn your wrist. Just do, drop your hips and your elbows and whatever, all the things that the coach says. And then you swing 100 times with that thought process. So if it's compassion, okay, I'm going to go and not just read about compassion. I'm going to memorize this compassionate verse. And then I'm going to meditate and posture myself to look for compassion throughout the day. And I'm already feeling overburdened by this.
Yeah. I was going to say, go to the nursing home, go to the homeless shelter, go to where you want compassion. There's opportunities out there. I don't want to do them, but
I don't either. Well, here's where I was going with that. You and I suffer from a lack of compassion to ourselves.
Yeah.
In the space of resilience and anxiety, you cannot go, I don't want you in the nursing home if you can't love yourself. If you cannot know self-compassion, how can you be compassionate to the nursing home or to your daughter? It's the number 2 commandment, right, from Jesus himself is
love others as you love yourself, which is terrible if you hate yourself.
If you cannot stand yourself for 15 minutes alone in a room, how in the world can you go to your wife and son who are just as sinful and broken and needing compassion and redeeming and all these other things as you do? So here we are at the crux, right? And I think most people would be like, oh, yeah, okay, I hear you. Good idea. You know what? And most people aren't going to be changing. They're not going to submit to the coach until what?
They break.
They break.
Yeah.
And okay, J.P. Moreland, and the story of this guy in the book, Finding Quiet, is he's a full professor. He's got all the accolades, and he broke. Woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning with a panic attack. And we've talked about, cortisol and DHEA and epinephrine and all these, you don't just catch it. And the book is about, when I look backwards in my childhood, and then this happened and that happened, I was a walking ball of getting ready to break. And he may have and we are all on the spectrum. We all have the camel's back that with one more straw could break. And we generally don't pay attention to these straws until the pain is enough for me to say, I got to get rid of some of these straws.
It's been years, but Dan Harris, a lot of people know, I think ABC, it was the network he's with. His book's back here. His book was 10% Happier. He has a podcast, 10% Happier. I think he has a meditation app. And it was his story, same thing. He was the anchor guy. Rock star, man. Yeah. And then he had a panic attack on air. So you can do Dan Harris panic attack and you can watch it on air. It's nothing dramatic. He just kind of stumbles his words. You can't get him out. They had to go to, cut to something else. And he had to realize that he had a panic attack. And he went and looked at how he had been growing that propensity
same kind of thing.
Through so many different things. So
another book that we've talked about in the past, Hardwiring Happiness.
All right. And
then his next book was Resilient.
Can't think of his name.
I can't either.
Okay, keep talking.
So we joke about it, right? You don't wake up and catch diabetes. You don't wake up and catch cancer and say, well, son of a gun, I've been smoking a pack a day, never once had cancer in my life for 40 years. Where did this come from? And so we want to look at ourselves with compassion. And for those who are in the midst of panic and anxiety and all of that, I appreciated J.P. Moreland here also saying, look, do not stigmatize somebody for using a medicine any more than stigmatizing a guy with cancer to cut the thing out and you need a surgeon.
Right.
Use the tools, but then, use the medicines. And for all of us who are in pre-anxiety, which is everybody, pre-panic attack, pre-depression, or just bad day, lack of resilience, how do you approach this to not become more at risk? You cannot remove all the straws from the camel's back. You can't quit your job and quit your wife and quit your kids and quit. No, you're just going to be just as depressed and anxious, as a bum on the street.
Well, but it comes back to your perspective on stress, saying stress is not bad. It's our response.
It's the response.
This hit me yesterday, Randy, after we talked about it. And I thought about if we think about the bad effects of smoking, right?
Yeah.
If you and I on the back deck, instead of looking at Pikes Peak and having a bowl of veggies or whatever, we knock back a couple smokes, maybe a beer every single day. Now, so we know that generally is going to lead to, cancer and obesity and yada, yada. That for those who just don't feel it's acute, because we got a lot of, this is me, we were at the table together talking with Steve Smith, and I was arguing until I broke.
I like the whitewater.
Until I broke a year or two later, arguing for this because I just didn't perceive it was bad. It was these are good things. I'm willingly taking. I want to take on all this stuff. I want to be a high achiever, and so with that in mind, to those our fellow high achievers and people out there thinking they're maybe doing well and not, but I thought about, man, that underwriting anxiety that I'm not giving gravity to. I thought about an open refrigerator door. So if my home is vacant right now, it never is, but if it was, and I had left the refrigerator open, and I come home 8 hours later, 9 hours later, 10 hours later. I've never done this, but that thing's going to have been running all day long. That engine will be at the height of heat. It could even burn out. So the engine is overheating. It may be cool in the room, especially if you've got a small house. I've cooled off the rest. And I thought, to me, that was telling, because when I have anxiety, man, it's negatively affecting everybody around me. Mm-hmm. They're getting cool or, whatever. And then maybe the food inside is not as cool. I could have some food that went bad. That if we think about that, if we are all having this undergirding anxiety at whatever level, maybe it's a 2, maybe it's a 9 that's there, we're just running ourselves hotter, harder than we would otherwise. And I think that's what we don't realize. And at the end of the day, when we realize, man, I have no capacity to deal with my spouse or my kids. I don't have anything left other than to watch Netflix or just go to bed or have a whiskey or whatever it is, medicate that. Because we don't realize we have been overrunning all day long with this energy.
Nowadays, we can now identify that in the lab. So what you just described, earlier this morning, we were talking about people who also, one of the main breaking points is lack of energy. They just can't do it anymore. And they say, I'm so tired, or I don't have energy. But we don't measure energy. Like in that refrigerator, we could measure the heat or the coolness in the fridge or the coolness outside of the room. How do you do that in a human? Well, on the brain side, this is that other book we were talking about, but on the brain side, so brain waves, alpha, beta.
What book?
So the book is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Joe Dispenza. And intriguing book. He does not write from a conservative Christian aspect. He writes it from a different kind of an aspect. But nevertheless, whatever your belief system is, your brain is creating waves, alpha, beta, theta, delta. And we know this, right? This is not alternative or hooey gooey. And when you're in what you just described, when you leave the refrigerator on or open, and you now have to produce more cold in order to get the thing done, that is high beta. So beta waves are what we're doing right now.
Can you say output? Is that
yeah, fair? Thinking. We are communicating, thinking, we're thinking about things. This is beta, we're probably in mid beta. High beta is going to be your stress response, fight or flight. And so high beta is if for whatever reason we heard a giant thunderclap or a car wreck outside, or, and your heart rate goes up and all of those kind of things. So many of us are operating not at the medium beta, but at that high beta because we perceive our jobs as something. And again, the stress is the perception of that. Yeah. And now we are creating humans, especially American humans, that are approaching their marriages and their jobs already having years of high beta, of the refrigerator doors open all the time, because it never shuts to go down into alpha, theta, delta being sleep. And we've talked about sleep a lot. If you don't get your 7 hours or whatever, and most people operating on 5 to 6 these days, maybe an average of 6 of bad sleep, and then you go right back to high beta. And this is you mentioned the refrigerator, and maybe a better one is you are operating your car in second gear at 60 miles an hour almost all the time. And then you come home and there is no second gear to go down to. You've trashed it. So you go to first, meaning I'm going to hide. I'm going to, leave me alone.
Survival.
It's just survival. So don't blame the second gear, or don't blame 60 miles an hour. Don't blame the stress, because we've said all along, what's the opposite of stress? Death. Okay, life is stress. It is good, but your stress response, and so go back to the golf coach, and it's kind of like you've got the evil golf coach over here saying, "Oh, that's a perfect swing," and we're hacking it. But we get a feedback loop that says, man, that ice cream is good. And it is in a certain kind of a context over here with the good coach that says, if we were in the sand pit, that kind of swing might be okay, but we're on the tee box. We're doing a drive. Don't have cake and ice cream on your birthday, but don't have it every day all the time and call it breakfast. Yeah. All of the, stressful work is good or for me, it was finals week, right? But if I had been doing the daily work all the time, finals week would have been much less stressful, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the golf coach is telling us, it is really hard and kind of boring to start your days with 5 minutes of breath work, Kevin, with 5 minutes of meditation. You know what that is? That is alpha and theta waves. When you purposefully close your eyes and go into yourself, your own thoughts, you've just went from high beta less.
Yeah.
By definition, no different than if we said, take 5 deep breaths. You just changed your heart rate. You just changed your blood pressure. These are the mechanics of what's going on. But we don't have a measuring stick for peace, joy, resilience, confidence. But are those things related to alpha, beta, theta, delta, and how much you've done this and that? So the coaching, the actual practical points that even people as they're driving, okay, don't close your eyes, but take a deep breath. Think about the breath. You have just changed your essence.
It's the Michael Jr. who I had on the Ziegler show recently. Think about what you're thinking about. Man, that one has stuck with me. And as we talked this morning, Randy, that thing you brought me, we talked about on the show, I think, years ago, of saying, Kevin, in essence, you were saying, how are you showcasing being an entrepreneur to your kids?
Yeah.
Are you
being a father, being a husband?
Yeah. As this high anxiety, burdened, man,
stressful.
To look out there at us as parents, what do we show? Are we showcasing our kids a marriage they would want to emulate, work that they would want to emulate, parenting that they would want to, ever even participate in? I mean, how are we? That's so convicting to me on this anxiety of being aware of what am I, letting in. But then to what you said too, I'm not going to stop being a spouse, father, business owner, whatever. So what am I left with? We can change the circumstances. I mean, I don't want to sidestep that. If you're in a crappy job with hard people, man, can you change your perspective for the better and have it make a difference? Absolutely. But to some degree, I get a little worn on that, because at some degree, if you're standing in a pile of crap, be as happy as you want, man, but you're in a pile of crap. I would really help you get out of that and wash your feet. So you've got to judge that. So circumstances, you got to look at those, but then it is I so often do, because even mine, what's really bad about my circumstances? Not really anything,
right?
But man, I can get wrapped up in it, and I have to think about what I'm thinking about and change my perspective. For me, it's the God complex. I go, I am not saving the world. Life is not dependent upon Kevin Miller. Very little.
Right. And if you carried that burden around with you, and then you and I were hanging out, you would bring me down.
Yeah.
And not only are you not saving the world, now you're hurting it. Which was another phrase in the book. One guy said it this way: you are, in a sense, so we have to nuance this, in a sense, you are morally obligated to be as happy, as joyful, as peaceful as possible. Because by definition, now we can measure this as well. Everybody, people know that if a bad apple walks in the room, narcissistic, whatever, stuck up kind of a guy, he's going to bring the tone of the room down. We all say, oh yeah, I felt that. And the opposite is true. And I would say this, I would support you that normally when you walk into the room goes up.
Agreed. I thought you were going to go here, though. We all know that we have a negative, as humans, a negativity bias, that the majority of our thoughts tend to be, and whether you want to attribute that to the, to
protective response or
spirituality or whatever that it is. And I thought you were going to say, to some degree, I agree, but it feels like in the culture, in social groups, that the propensity for the bad apple to come in and sour is more weightier.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we can measure that actually. So there are now brainwaves, again, going back to this, that what does your brainwaves do when sour apple walks in the room? It's measure. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the opposite is true too. So we are morally obligated to bring a self that's going to, share improvement to the world. Where this hit me this morning was on my sour apple drive to school. Most parents don't appreciate being a chauffeur.
Agreed.
Okay. And I thought, okay, I can either hate my job, but I can't get rid of this one, right? I'm not standing in a pile of crap or whatever. I'm not going to force my kids to walk.
We could hire drivers.
We could.
I'd feel like a schmuck, but...
And now I'm convicting myself, I am morally obligated to bring a tone to the car that's going to help my kids.
Yeah.
Now, if they're sour apples, then I can call them out. But let me not contribute to the issue. And so this morning, anyway, one of them was a sour apple, and I'm like, hey. I said, you don't choose to be grumpy. What you just said right there had no place. So now, granted, he's 10 and he's not really going to be able to think about this with me, but how do I become the kind of dad that's going to encourage my 10-year-old to become 11 and less sour, more, more sweet? But at the same time, I can't also walk around and think, oh, I'm a failure as a father because my sour, grumpy kid is going to school. It's this, and this goes back to what's my default mode brain. And that's what you just said is mostly negative, mostly fearful, mostly anxious, mostly, and if we look at the amount of brain electricity, energy that is going on to maintain a default mode of fear, anxious, depressed, negativity versus resilience, capacity, love, joy, peace, kindness, patience, gentleness. It's overwhelmingly on this other side. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think we've brought a case to ourselves and to people to say, okay, how do I be becoming a 53-year-old guy next week that is a little bit more joyful, a little bit more resilient than I was at 52? I have got to be honest with myself and wake up in the morning or go to bed on time, turn the darn TV off. For me, I struggle with not eating too late into the night. I go to bed less full in order to be becoming the kind of guy who in the morning can say, let me purposefully close my eyes, put my brain in that alpha theta state where by definition you are wellering more than you are unwellering. This is the formation of a habit to be forming me to be becoming the guy I want to become.
I love that. The guy I want to become. It's in the book that I've just written of talking about that to ourselves. I want to be the kind of guy who does X. And we could look at every area of significance in our lives and go, what do I want to be? Intentionality in regards to the book I've been reading, lately. But I think about that, to think, when do we think about, or I want to be thinking about, what is my state of being? What is my mental state right now? Getting into the car, getting ready to show for the cars. What is my mental state? getting into the office, standing in front of your desk. Okay, before I start banging away, what is my mental state right now? Man, I'm 50. That has not been a consistent part of my life to drive up into the driveway at night before I walk into everybody and go, what is my mental state? And it may not be that I can cure it, but at least to be aware and go, man, I am bitter. I'm bitter right now because of X, Y, Z that happened here, because of the pressures here, or I'm afraid because my wife and I had this hard conversation. I got to walk in and deal with it, and to be aware. And normally we're just on autopilot, but for me, again, it's just so convicting to think about, what kind of mental state do I want?
Yeah.
What would I be proud of? I mean, I don't want to be your friend if you're neurotic, Randy. If you're wigged out,
want to be me.
If you're wigged out, if you don't have any time for me. Yeah. I mean, that's, like you look at love languages and stuff, and mine is, I guess you could say time, but just attention. Am I important enough to command your attention? And I am. Man, it speaks so much to me that I could knock on your door. You've always, generally, unless you got a patient right there, got a minute for me. You're the kind of guy, so I know you as the kind of guy who wants to be a good friend, who wants to have time, who doesn't want to be, honestly, what you were 6 years ago. When did we start working together some? And you're going with your clipboard and your suit and tie frantically to the next person because you're already an hour behind and people are pissed off in the waiting room. And to see you change, but to put that on me, do I want to be that busy, anxious guy? No, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that from me. Even if there's some credibility that goes with. Right.
Wow. Look at you, how busy you are. And
I think that we're falling away from that. And I know that I am with people. When I hear somebody and they have no schedule openings, they never have a moment, I think, okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you're not more successful, that you don't have some flexibility and time in your life. When can we get back to that? And yet it feels like culturally there's the constant norming and even elevating, because we all want to just justify where we're at, of being anxious and neurotic. And I see it with the kids. It's almost like a badge of honor. Oh, I'm freaking out.
Oh, Kev, we've got a rash of high school students. Yeah. And talk about anxiety. And I'm on medications, kind of a badge. Again, not to stigmatize medications. There's a time and a place. It needs to be the right thing to do. But
that's not saying the medication is bad, but the desire or the normalizing.
I'm so busy that I need this, or that it crushed me, or something. And what we were saying about, if almost every human, when you step back and think, okay, what about on your deathbed, and you look back. Okay, don't even go to deathbed. What about right now, today? What is the absolute most important thing in your life? And you would say, my relationship with God. Who I am at core. And I would submit to all of us, in the psychology of the way that God set things up, is that we first have a sense of self as an infant, of cold, hunger, pain.
I was going to question you saying that relationship. Can you really, and now we're just getting into deep, can you really do that without first being at least aware of and having a relationship with self? How can I even authentically?
No, that's what I'm arguing.
Oh, well, we're arguing the same thing.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
But in a lot of Christian circles, it would be like, oh no, you that is a selfish, kind of like we're born into sin idea, that there's a badness there. I'm like, well, infants are infants, and yes, we would say, okay, whatever the theology is of born into sin, original sin, and all those kind of things, nobody is perfect.
Yeah.
But seemingly, God has designed the system to where the first awareness, right, going into the reality of the physics of biochemistry, is self.
Yeah.
Pain, cold, hunger. And like I was telling you this morning, we know that when a baby is born, they are born into delta waves. They cannot have a thought of God.
Right.
They can't, because they only have a sense of awareness, self. This is a more like when you're dreaming. I would never hold you responsible for something you said while you're asleep, even though theoretically it came out of your brain or whatever else, right? So that's the baby's mind. So as the sense of self. But I grew up thinking that's the worst. That's narcissism. That's selfish. And that's what we were saying about
even saying that from the Christian realm, that's like hoodoo guru, you're enlightened, and
right,
Eastern religion and all that.
And that's where I appreciate the book. So here's a very theologically conservative author who is saying the words that I am saying about coherence, getting your brain and heart and breath on the same wavelength, right? This sounds hooey-gooey, but now we can measure wavelengths.
But, hooey-gooey. But I grew up, the majority of my life, in the church, in the evangelical church, different religions, whatever. And in my own journey through personal development and whatnot, felt like, and I struggle with this today, that we're up here on the platform preaching to people who are so broken and unaware of themselves, I question their capacity for God at all.
Ooh,
to be within them, to make a difference.
To be aware of God. I thought you were going to say is their capacity to go and serve. But if you go even deeper,
further,
that's further down the line.
Well, that may be where it came from, because we got the pastor up there going, okay, all of us arrived Christians, let's go out there and serve everybody else. And I'm looking back here, and I know that dude, and he's like
not arrived.
2 moments away from suicide. Their marriage is exploding. They're just listening to this thing, and it's like Charlie Brown. They're hearing wah, wah, wah. There's no relation to their life because they are so wrecked. And I feel like so many of it, that we need this awareness of self. And it's almost a sequential thing. It's like you and I talking about what is the number one. We did a show on this. What is the most important thing? If you only did, we kind of came down to sleep, recovery, with the bottom of the.
Which, let's go a step further. Go back to delta waves.
All right.
Right. Go back to a brain that's just feeling or just being, just recovering from the stress of the day. Again, it's your stress response, and if you don't sleep as a part of stress response, then you will wake up the next day and be more stressed.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very, very close relationship between sleep and Sabbath, which means cease, stop.
Yeah.
Right? Just be. Very close relationship there. And I have to say this too, because our culture, if we don't approach this as, you and I are going to say, we're following Jesus as much as we can, and we're not promoting a false sense of self-esteem. Like, I'm not to esteem myself as better than you. But I can't esteem myself as nothing, as worthless, as whatever. So it's a sense of awareness, a sense of not of self-care, self-love, not selfish.
Yeah.
Not self. So that nuance is so subtle, and so that yes, our culture dramatically messes this up. And then we have a psychology that's now saying, if you're confused about your gender even or whatever, then the world is going to bend around you to the tune of disfiguring surgeries or chemicals that, that's a very controversial kind of thing. But I would say, no, I care for, you are born in this way. I care for that person. We don't need to change you because of you should love you. Anyway, this is a part of our cultural confusion.
It is, and that
it's so hard.
It is. It's so deep. Which all of this stuff we're talking about the self, and I don't know how we can do that without theology and doctrine and perspective, again, on self-awareness and what do you believe, what are your values. And I'm doing a show coming up on values and how much more anxiety do I have when I don't even know what I value, and I am just running through
from one thing to the next.
I did want to just pull out again from a tangible aspect, you mentioning you just said something about anxiety and sleep, and it made me think about, I'm so aware, I've been convicted sometimes when I've gone to sleep after watching whatever, show or movie or more so even, music, and wake up in the morning and that tune is going through. And it may not be something terrible, but if it's, Billie Jean is not my lover, I'm thinking, really, that was just run through my head all night long. It's amazing to me how much of the anxieties and the worries, of, again,
Okay, well, let me convict you a little more.
Please.
This is one of those things where I say, Kevin, you got to read this book. So he mentions
It's up on my screen. I will. I'll order it.
He mentions the tactic. Again, the golf coach is going to say, Kevin, I've noticed that your wrists aren't quite right here, and it's called you're going to bed with the wrong thoughts.
Okay.
So let me give you a suggestion. Go to bed with these different thoughts. Now, you can either do it or don't, but for the next 90 days in a row, like we're going to come out to the golf course and I want you to swing this way. It's called, don't watch those shows, watch these shows. Don't read those books, read these books. And he mentions, and in fact, the other book also, the Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself book, is saying that as your brain is going from high beta to lower, to then alpha, and then theta, and then you're falling. That's kind of why we say fall asleep.
Huh.
But you're going through this stuff. If you're plummeting, like I've always kind of prided myself on, I'd fall asleep really fast. Probably, that it's called latency. So my watch tells me that my latency period is sometimes like 2-3 minutes. And it ought to be 7 to 10. And then 20 to 30 is too long, right, to fall asleep. But if you just go like a rock, then whatever you were thinking up here, you're probably bringing with you down here into delta wave, like what you just said. And if up here is mostly negative, which we've established it mostly is.
If I don't alter it, yeah.
If you don't change it, you are.
Yeah.
So by definition, you are choosing unawares to practice these bad golf habits. And then we wonder, why can't we hit the ball down the fairway straight? Why do I always hook it?
Yeah.
Like, well, you've practiced hooking it.
Just a tangible thing. You got me back to reading fiction books, which I had not for so long at night. I look forward to going to bed, to going to bed to read the next thing. I do sometimes it's not a bad, I don't read bad books, but sometimes I'll realize, it's just a little more exciting than I want right before going to bed. Right. And, let me pick something else. But I love having a redeeming story, redeeming thought that's just a tangible thing. Obviously, if you can meditate and get your head on right or whatever, but there are some things to do. I do, Randy, want to just on an overall aspect with this, of looking at anxiety, and I didn't intend it, didn't talk about it, but we've gotten into talking about spirituality quite a bit in this. It's hard for me not to feel like that's one of the primary treatments, things to consider as far as anxiety, at least for me. When my life is just about me, I am the end of the story. There is no greater picture. That's anxious.
Right. The world is back on your shoulders.
The world is back on that is anxious no matter what you feel like. But from a literal, the roles in my life as a father, as a husband, as a business person, as an influencer, as an author, as a whatever, to realize that once, because over here we're saying, man, you've got to care for self. You need self-confidence. You need self-esteem. Yes, you need the confidence that doesn't require me to have to be all things to all people either. Because over here, I am not God.
Right.
I am not God. My kids, as much as important as we think that I am, if I get hit by a truck this afternoon, a year from now, they're going to exist. Something will have worked out. My friends and family will come around. My life insurance policy, they will exist. And I know that that's exaggerated, but sometimes it takes stuff like that for me to think, man, this is not all on me. Why am I so wrapped up in myself? And it to me, it sometimes comes to feeling there's pride and ego, because we all want to be important. And especially if you don't have purpose in your work, man, you want to be important to your family or vice versa or whatever. We all want this importance. My gosh, to back up and go, what am I so wrapped up about? Holy smokes, Kevin. My wife, she existed before I did. She's not dependent upon me. And yeah, even if we look at finances, I got good life insurance. They'll be okay. They may be better off financially, but to look at that and go, what am I? And now, but further, if I do believe not only in a bigger picture, but in an actual being, a God, a deity, I think, really, is this much riding on me? Is he so needy of me?
Right. To be the influencer, the father. Your children's eternal destiny is on your hands. There is that nuance, the sense of pride or arrogance or egotistical approach.
Then there's tension because we're not trying to minimize the role. I'm not going to go flippantly out here and go, it doesn't freaking matter, man. There'll be fine without me. Let's go golf. Come on, all day long for the next week. But how do we hold that tension of gravity? And I believe God does have me, for these roles and has an intent for me, but He's not dependent upon.
So to me, Kevin, it's that, and we said it this morning, is I'm a little taken aback by the reality that in all likelihood, the end all purpose of this existence is going to go back to this idea of being, of thought, of mind, of mind, of God as first mind, of principle, of the first causes. And this life is a training ground, a preparation for a next life that has more gravity, more challenge, more excitement within that realm of mind, of that energy. We still cannot, Einstein, we still can't define energy. E equals mc squared and all this kind of stuff. And like you and I have said, are we meant to understand this? That we are in the infinite. Yeah. And no. And even as somebody I always picture somebody listening to this in the car, and like I listen to my podcast, and it's like, I'm going to get to where I'm going. And then I got to hit off. Yeah. And then I got to go do a thing. But doing that thing is not the end all be all, whether it's fatherhood, husbandhood, or even my own, this side of death, pursuit of Jesus, of how to live. There is a mystery of something beyond us that I will eagerly die for, that I will eagerly spend my life in pursuit of, and that's why I'm willing to change what I eat. That's why I'm willing to try to go to bed on time and to try to listen to a golf coach who's going to tell me, eat more of this and less of that. I'm going to say, oh, okay, that's okay. I'm going to try.
You use the word die for. I'm going to die for, to think about battle, to think about the gravity that we do give life, even as I find myself for this topic. A muse lately has become, can I be lighthearted? I am not a lighthearted person by nature. Why not? Why can't I do both?
Because we just talked about dying for something.
I know, but okay, right. And so it brings me to, it's not minimizing the gravity,
right,
to also be lighthearted, which makes me think of your book about the zebras. What's the title?
Why don't zebras get ulcers?
Yeah, I saw it recently somewhere, and that they have full capacity to understand the gravity of that lion coming after them that is going to kill them.
Somebody.
If they don't perform at a high level. So they've been preparing, eating their veggies to perform at a high level. They do, it's over, and then they start cracking jokes with each other.
Yep.
Man, did you see that? Was the mangest looking lion
like the
I ever
zebra on Madagascar.
Madagascar, there you go. Can I hold those and have confidence in myself and take care of myself, and yet realize I am not God? Can I have gravity to my roles and then realize it's not all dependent upon me? And it comes back to attention. Maybe is not a bad word, because even that in itself sounds anxiety ridden.
That's right. Yeah.
It's you, the bother. Can I hold them both? Palms up.
And I think yes, and not perfectly. You will fail, and it's okay, because
that gives me anxiety, Randy. No,
but it's a lighthearted failure.
It's a lighthearted. But that would be there would be things I can fail, and it's not going to be an ultimate failure. It's not all on me.
Oh, we're coming up to the end of our time. But one of the lines in the book, and I underline it, and I sit there and I think about it, and it is, don't waste your pain. Don't waste your failure. Don't waste your anxiety, Kevin.
Okay.
Let's stick with pain. Don't waste your symptom. Pain is there for a reason. It teaches. It forms. It's your coach. And the coach is saying, gosh, if you do that again, you're going to wrench your shoulder. Well, I don't really believe you. And we keep going until we feel the pain again. Can we go into tomorrow? It's Friday morning for you. Can we go into Friday morning, and I've got a prospect, right? I'm going to try to sell my product to this guy. And fail, success? Can I go into this? And if I fail, I'm not going to be down in the dumps. I'm going to say, what did I say wrong, do wrong, think wrong, whatever else? And if I succeed, I'm not going to think, oh my gosh, I'm the best guy in the world, whatever else. I say, what did I do in order to become the kind of guy who can invite somebody else to buy a product that I'm selling that I believe is going to help this guy? Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to that, even though sport is such a good analogy. You will not win every time, and it hurts.
Yeah.
But practice does not make perfect. We strive not for perfection, but for excellence. Always a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. I can get up for that.
I want a little less anxiety.
Well, friends, thanks for tuning in as we all work to leverage the power of our unique inner drive to bolster it and wake every day to our authentic, driven, and inspired lives. You can find Dr. Randy James if you want to further at truelifemedicine.com. A lot of you guys connect with his practice, and sometimes I get to see you out here in the mountains of Colorado, getting him to help bolster your drive by helping you find your peak wellness. If you appreciate this podcast, it would be a gift if you'd rate it on Spotify, give us a rating and a review on Apple. You can watch it and see clips on the whole thing on YouTube, or clips as well there, or on social media. Find me at kevinmiller.co, about anywhere and everywhere. And if you want to learn how to master your own inner drive, check out my book, What Drives You, on Amazon. You can find it about any form you want. Until next time, stay driven.
Yeah.